Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth.
Well, more than 3 weeks following Bud Crawford's unsettling traffic stop in Omaha, and the boxing champ is back in his hometown tonight. Crawford declined to talk about that incident, which led to press conferences with the police chief and mayor, and even a change to how officers conduct traffic stops. Tonight, Bud wanted to shift the focus back to the community, and the organization honoring him was eager to do the same. First Alert 6's Andrew Pfeiffer has the story.
He really has brought is a light that has shined for all of us.
This is the highest honor.
3 weeks after the city threw him a celebratory parade for capturing 3 unified division boxing titles, Bud Crawford is back in Omaha. Tonight, he was bestowed one of the highest honors from the Omaha tribe.
I'm feeling great, for an Indian reservation to look at me and honor me with, the things that they feel have never been given to somebody else outside of, the reservation is definitely an honor.
We just wanted to give him this honor. Bud has always been great with the youth, and having the youth come down from the reservation, this is like a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
The Black, Brown, and Red Coalition honored Bud with a hand-stitched quilt from the Omaha tribe. Members of the Black, Latino, and Native community all took part in the ceremony.
He has a lot of love from the Native American community. Although there's not too many natives in the city, but there's some on the reservation, well, most on the reservation, they love him. They really support him and love him a lot.
Crawford received gifts and took photos with kids who drove hours from their reservations to meet the champ.
For these kids that's coming from these reservations and to be able to look up to somebody that's so close to them is very important.
Even though Bud is a world, renowned champion, he's our local hero, and he's no stranger to us.
It feels great, because I give a lot of people in Nebraska hope that, anything is possible.
Reporting in Omaha, I'm Andrew Pfeiffer, First Alert 6.
Oh, you know exactly where I'm going with this. This event was organized by a group calling itself the Black, Brown, and Red Coalition. That's already scary. They say the purpose of these events that they like to hold is to build cross-cultural dialogue between Black, Brown, and Red communities. Because apparently the only way you can build any sort of cross-cultural dialogue is by inviting high-profile Black people to show up for your event and bring lots of white media news cameras to cover it. And by the way, this same organization, back in June of this year, they were honoring John Ewing, the first Black mayor of Omaha. And then a few months later, they were posting about how the Omaha police, without mentioning that these were white cops, by the way, were holding Terence Crawford at gunpoint. But it is interesting to see that the Brown and Red Coalition decided that they wanted to include Black people, and apparently this is the only way that they could get some actual attention for themselves, and we all know why. Look, there's simply no substitute for the moral, cultural, and historical legitimacy that the foundational Black community stands for and has always represented. The tide of history that we embody, that's not a brag, it's a fact. Now, a lot of people don't like it because of the fact that they love to refer to our history. They always refer to our struggle. They refer to us as being a rhetorical or cultural touchstone for anything they want to say about themselves, even their own aspirations. And yet when you say, hey, don't you think this group that you keep pointing to all the time and you keep referencing their history when talking about yourself, you keep talking about their figures when trying to refer to yourself, don't you think that that group, at least at the very least, deserves some sort of recognition for how unique they've been? Oh, hell no. It's no different than anybody else. And as far as I'm concerned, this little event is no different, no better. I'm not going to knock Terence Crawford for showing up for this event because that would be uncalled for. If there's some group that says that they want to honor him, quote unquote, and especially if white media cameras are going to be there, well, he is a Black celebrity, and that being the case, since he's the biggest thing in boxing, it would be unnatural if he didn't show up, especially if it's in his hometown. But what I want to say is we need to be careful about validating any of that Black, Brown, or in this case, Black, Brown, Red alliance stuff. Or should I say coalition. Everyone else benefits from these so-called alliances and coalitions except for us. We keep lending our voices and our numbers and our historical and cultural legitimacy to everyone else's causes. But they never lend theirs to ours. We don't need another kumbaya moment. What we need are tangible policies specifically for us to address the specific problems that we face. That's what should have been brought into consideration during this event, but wasn't. This Black, Brown, and Red coalition mentioned that Terence Crawford had been accosted and threatened by the Omaha police, but acknowledging it was as far as they went. What's really called for, what's actually necessary, is an anti-black hate crime law. That's what they should have been advocating for. A law that recognizes the obvious open anti-black racism applied against black Americans like Terence Crawford. An anti-black hate crime law that also applies to the thugs in blue, to the police. We don't need anybody giving us empty words of sympathy. What's required is advocacy for the kind of policies that we need. You've never had any red or brown person in that place who wins a huge athletic victory and then they come home and they get threatened at gunpoint by the police. Now, if these guys are not willing to own up to that historical reality and they're not willing to actually take a stand against it, then what they're really saying is, go ahead and hold hands with us, go ahead and do some photo ops with us so we can make these cameras think that our numbers are bigger than they really are. And of course, with you guys in the picture, we know that you represent a unique historical and moral legitimacy that the rest of us don't have. So we're going to go ahead and use that as a springboard to get what we want while you get left in the dust. What's happening here is more of that onboarding of that black fill-in-the-blank coalition stuff. But there's also the fact whenever we see these weird little instances like this, it's almost always a Trojan horse for intersectionality. That train is never late. When I see groups like this, you know that most of what they're going to be talking about is going to be of the interest to the brown and red coalition. And as far as black folks, that's just a momentary incidental that's going to be mentioned and then moved on from. Organizations like this are at best just social clubs for the boule mouthpieces for the white left. Those guys, they're going to be signal boosting these Greek frats and sororities and other organizations of self-interested Negroes who have never done anything for black people other than themselves. And of course, I'm sure that we'll also find, without much digging, that these guys are also going to be pushing feminist nonsense. They're going to have that stuff shoehorned in there too. That's what these guys are actually about. On their Facebook page, they were trying to push hysteria because the federal government wants to have a registry for illegal aliens. And that being the case, why should somebody actually be expected to obey the law? They gave a quote from some woman saying, historically, we know that we have to sit up and pay attention anytime a government says it's going to set up a registry on the basis of national origin or race or religion or any other immutable characteristic. Now, did the federal government say anything about people's national origin or race or religion? No. What they said is your immigration status, and that is not an immutable characteristic. If something is immutable, what that means is it cannot change. Immigration status is not an immutable characteristic. Hell, you have these people running around talking about how they want amnesty, so obviously they know that immigration status is actually quite fluid, pun intended. But skin color, there's something that's an immutable characteristic, you know, like if you're a black person around all these racist white punks in the police in Omaha. That's an immutable characteristic. But the DHS is not saying anything about national origin or race or religion, and they know it. They're trying to make a false connection between people who broke the law to be here, many of whom come from cultures that are rabidly anti-black, but the brown and red coalition, they didn't have anything to say about that conveniently, and these same individuals broke America's laws to get in and broke America's laws by staying here. That has nothing to do with anyone's national origin. There's illegal aliens from all over the planet here, and all of them are criminals, and it has nothing to do with race or religion either. Keep in mind, these are the exact same Hispanics who can't wait to tell you that they classify themselves as white on employment applications, on school applications, driver's licenses, and birth certificates. The exact same people who, whenever it's convenient to them, or when white supremacy has its foot up their behinds, suddenly they start saying that they're brown. Brown, red, black coalitions they start talking about. So much for immutable characteristics. But these are the very groups who are making these organizations for their own benefit. It has nothing to do with what's going to be helping black people. Because the brown contingent of this black, brown, and red coalition, quote unquote, they need to be the main ones leading the charge against the anti-black racism that comes from Hispanic culture. Latin America is absolutely riddled and infested with anti-black racism, and the individuals who practice it there bring it here. So why aren't these guys calling it out? Why aren't they saying anything about it? See, there's a real threat, a real issue that actually needs to be talked about. But these guys aren't talking about it, and they'll have empty-headed black folks standing right beside them while they ignore the elephant in the room, and they'll be sitting there going, oh, we're just all best friends here, while they're not saying anything about the anti-black racism that they got from inside their very organization. And don't be fooled. Before it's all over, you can bet they're going to be trying to get Terence Crawford to say that we need to protest the ICE deportations. All this stuff. We all just people, don't you knows? That's what they're going to be pushing for before it's all over. They'll be trying to get him to say some stuff like that. They'll be saying he needs to stick up for Native American reparations. He needs to stick up for Native American land reclamation. After all, we gave you this blanket here, and that being the case, you should go ahead and stick up for all of our issues. And as for yours, well, we'll pray about it or something. That's the angle that these other groups are actually playing. Meanwhile, they're not caping for us on anything. So again, I'm not going to be saying that there's something wrong with Terence Crawford for having attended this event and accepted the honors that this group was bestowing on him. And as the black media has told you for 20 years, we know better than to expect any black celebrity to actually be demanding, black empowerment or anything that would be benefiting black people specifically, like, say, an anti-black hate crime law that would allow for police to be punished if they called themselves pulling black people over without cause and then drawing guns on them for no reason. I would like to imagine that Terence Crawford would actually be in favor of policies like that, and that he would use a platform like the one he has to tell groups such as the Black, Brown, and Red Coalition that they ought to be advocating for that as well. But at the end of the day, we need to be asking serious questions about who these groups are, who these organizations are, what they actually stand for, and whether or not it's the same thing as us. Because if they're not, then your Black, Brown, and Red Coalition is nothing more than a big white lie. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: David Williams, City Soapbox TV, Rahman Mohammed, Jimmy Whitfield, and William Zellers. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.